bald eagle on a snag, and it had its back to me, and then it kind of perked up. I was about to move to try to get a better shot. It's literally sitting over the creek, you know, probably hunting, but I just stayed patient, and sure enough, it started doing the 200+ degree head turn and then flew off. So it should be a good shot. Even if it's not like my best shot ever, it's like still, I'm just so glad I came out. It's so good to get out here. All right, we're back. So if you're like me, an aspiring wildlife filmmaker and or photographer, hopefully this list can help you. I did a video similar to this last year, but I felt like it needed some updates. And full transparency up front, I'm not labeling myself a wildlife filmmaker in the sense that I've made any, award-winning wildlife and conservation films and been embedded on assignment to film wildlife or anything like that. So the key word here is aspiring. But I'm constantly out there filming and photographing wildlife. Yes, a lot of it is birding, but I'll take anything I can get my hands on. So I'm learning, failing, learning more. I'm getting better. And I think there's a path, which I will hopefully illuminate by the end of this video, how this can all translate to, as mentioned, creating wildlife and conservation topic films and taking that, hopefully, passion for those things to a good place. So here are 6 things I've learned from wildlife filmmaking, or thereabouts. Okay, first off, the most important thing to do is start small in your own backyard. A local park, a state park, anything you have access to. Everyone wants to save the rhinos and save the whales, but I heard an incredible photographer, photojournalist, conservationist, marine biologist, like I heard this person in person, talk about how those huge projects, those big conservation efforts, they already have the teams and the budgets. And that's not to say you can't improve and grow and network and build and reach those heights if that's your dream. I mean, I certainly want to take my passion for wildlife filmmaking and conservation to different places, but there are great stories in your own backyard that need telling too, especially if in your own backyard they're gonna level 10 acres of old forest to make a parking lot for a goddamn PGA event, or level it for gaudy mansions. But enough of my bleeding heart crap for now. Seriously though, I think about small stories by me. For example, coyotes returning to our neighborhoods only in the last decade. Broader stories like bald eagles flourishing here in that same time span. River otters returning to our local state park. And topics like our last interior forest in the entire county and how important that is for our water, wildlife, and local ecosystems. So the point is, start small in your own backyard with what you have access to, and you'll find that the conservation and wildlife stories around you are pretty interesting. Listen to this. Pretty crazy that like 2 weeks ago, I stood on that creek when it was like 6 inches of solid ice, maybe more. And now it's gonna be like 74 degrees today. But moving on, the second thing I learned is as close to a hot take as I've had with my YouTube channel, which is that gear might actually matter. I mean, it does in the basic sense that if you don't have a telephoto lens and a decent camera, you're not gonna be capturing a ton of great wildlife shots. But what I'm starting to see now is that if I want to take it to the next level, I need to practice more with the right gear. I'll give you for instance, and maybe this is user error, but the travel tripod I use, and a good one at that, with this small fluid video head, isn't really gonna cut it in terms of tracking birds in flight. Birds of prey, birds in general. I do practice this quite a bit, and I need to practice it quite a bit more, but I think if I intend to keep going on this path, I might be due for a gimbal tripod head. Most of my shots right now are static, locked off, tripod shots of the wildlife doing its thing. And that's fine, by the way, as it actually helps me practice framing composition, be patient with what's unfolding in front of me, and so on. But I've missed a ton of great, raptor shots because the weight distribution of that aforementioned travel tripod fluid video head just doesn't allow for smooth tracking in the way I need it to. Actually, I'll give you one other gear mattering example. So I have 2 cameras, the FX3 and the A7R5. both incredible cameras. But the bird's eye tracking on the A7R5 is far superior than the normal subject tracking, as it doesn't have the bird option, on the FX3. Don't get me wrong, the subject tracking on the FX3 works for 90 to 95% of my shots, wildlife and or otherwise, probably even more for just human tracking. But I found that the tech in the A7R5 just never misses. Locking onto a songbird's eye at 25 yards or more away is insane. But I still use both cameras when I'm shooting wildlife. They're awesome. And for my lens, I'm using, while I'm talking about gear, I'm using the Sigma 150 to 600 sport lens, an awesome lens for wildlife video, even with the variable aperture. And actually, sometimes the variable aperture helps in that I don't ever use an ND during the daytime for that lens, but I digress. Gear for wildlife filmmaking kind of matters, I think. Next, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in another video, but if I didn't, good, and if I did, it's worth mentioning again. Wildlife photography, videography, filmmaking, especially birding, is, in my opinion, one of the hardest, if not the hardest, kinds of creative paths to succeed in, at least that I've experienced. I mean, define success. But like, it's so chaotic, so unpredictable. Yeah, there are migration patterns and things that can be tracked and predicted season to season, year to year. But a bird in a tree, for example, to get that shot, to get a clean shot, to get a visually interesting shot, to get an artistic shot, to get anything once the tree has bloomed and the subject is obscured by leaves, nothing harder. For work, I shoot a lot of sports, for self-interest, some travel landscape stuff, a bunch of other stuff when I'm traveling as well. And for the most part, you can put the time into those things and come away with something. But the amount of times I go out to shoot wildlife and come back with absolutely nothing is staggering. And that's what makes it interesting, challenging, even fun. It's the journey epitomized, meaning the journey, not the destination. And it also forces you to lock in, to be quiet, to look, to listen, to focus first on the world around you before focusing on your equipment, if that makes sense. So yeah, best kind and hardest kind, in my humble opinion, of creative endeavor to endeavor upon. The next thing I've learned, which might be the coolest thing to experience once you start noticing it, is animal behavior. Specifically, like the best example I can give of this is crows. Crows, in addition to being cool birds, are nature's mischief makers in a way, but they're also awesome magnets and alarm systems for other wildlife. That's how I got these shots of this pair of barred owls. I heard the commotion and followed the crows straight to the owls they were pestering. There's also other things I've noticed too, like different behavior of different birds. Those owls didn't budge, and they let me film them and photograph them for like 15 minutes. I was pretty far away with my, telephoto lens. But like eastern towhees, however you say it, they'll just sit there and sing and let me film and photograph them nonstop from close. But a hawk or a bald eagle, skittish. The belted kingfishers I've been tracking and trying to get a shot of for weeks, instead of chasing it down the creek and flushing it out, I picked a good spot and I waited and they came to me, and I also know where their nest is now. This is very exciting stuff. The sun hasn't even eclipsed the hills. I mean, we are out here doing the work. We're doing the work. They do not like me shadowing them up and down the creek, and are vocal about this dislike, to say the least. So again, with that behavior, I just put my camera down and watched them. Watched which perches were their favorites, even saw where they nest. I'm also convinced that birds and animals like, again, foxes for example, are much more tolerant and unfazed by people when they're in neighborhoods, as opposed to being in like the middle of a forest. In the forest, they are way more guarded, skittish, spooked, and harder to capture. That's just an opinion. I have no science to back that up, it's just my thought. But yeah, the belted kingfisher, that was a couple weeks tracking those, that was cool. I mean, I'm convinced that as I walk the paths in my state park through the woods, the birds are literally talking to each other about me, that they're using a kind of alarm system to call out, dude walking down the trail holding something, everyone look out. Actually, listen to a cool podcast on this, but that's a story for another day, so moving on. So the next thing I think is important to mention is the negative connotation with being a birder, a hopeful conservationist. a wildlife or aspiring wildlife photographer or filmmaker. I'll try to do this without ranting. There's just a knee-jerk reaction to it. At least with being a birder, it's harmless. It's usually just being looked at sideways like some weirdo. People tend to think it's a hobby reserved for retirees with too much time in their hands and creepers that walk through the woods, not brown creepers. And you know what? It is. Well, not the creeper part, but I'm sure they're out there too, so stay safe. Point is, water off a duck's back. Get out and hike your own hike and do it your way and enjoy it. But what's a bit more frustrating is the conservationist angle, meaning that I think the negative connotation, that knee-jerk reaction, starts to kind of melt and mold into an overlap with being labeled a tree hugger. And this is where it unfortunately starts getting really frustrating. Conservation, intact ecosystems, healthy forests, meadows, and creeks and rivers, clean air, clean water, all of this should be a bipartisan issue, but in truth, trying to explain to someone that doesn't get why a 10-acre patch of forest is important, or shit, even just why insects are important for birds and other animals, up the food chain, I mean, it's like pulling teeth. It's crazy to see so many people so disconnected with the world around them. Somehow building more strip malls with, bougie eateries that pay, menial hourly wages supports the local economy and is as American as apple pie, but a bald eagle hunting in an intact riparian corridor isn't. I'm getting fired up. Look, I'm not qualified to speak on socioeconomics or politics or finance or science or whatever. I'm just saying, if people think you're a weirdo for birding, who cares? But when people don't understand why, at its core, nature and ecosystems and native species of plants and overpopulation and overgrazing of deer, an example around here, and the right food for insects and birds and clean waterways, and all those things, when they don't understand why these are wildly important, I guess I've learned not to waste my time trying to explain it to them. I just get out into the woods, hike my own hike, do my own thing. But moving on. So the last thing I've learned is my why I'm doing this. If not properly illuminated in all the reasons I've given thus far, it's not to build some list or get personal records on eBird. In fact, I haven't been logging anything on eBird for the last 4 months. I mean, I think I was doing it for the wrong reasons too, which was just to build a list. But this isn't like a sport or a video game to collect stats. I mean, it was fun to kind of track and log stuff, but it's funny, because in the Listers documentary, which some of you might maybe have heard of, I'm sure a lot of birders have, but I'm sure that documentary isn't perfect in terms of whatever, its science or overarching effect on the community. Kind of, that documentary kind of steered me towards this decision, not logging everything. Because seeing people that were doing it just to get records, I mean, it's just bizarre. To each their own, I suppose. I mean, I personally love the documentary just for what it was and for its entertainment value, but I do all of this because I just enjoy it. I enjoy being outside, learning about wildlife, maybe even one day to make even minuscule positive impact on the natural world around me, not to build some list. I mean, as far as eBird, if science is truly relying on me, then I feel like science failed. But I'm not qualified to, be a reporter, and if I get one more email from our local eBird representative telling me I reported something wrong, why are you counting on me? I'm a beginner. I'm doing this for fun. I mean, maybe even for a therapeutic thing. Have scientists do the science. I'll be out there doing my moving meditation without needing to log everything I see. It's also kind of a symptom of our culture in general. You can't just go for a run anymore. You have to log your miles and stats and show everyone on your Strava Instagram story. But before I get too fired up and carried away, yeah, it's so cliche and overstated, but for me, it's 100% about the journey, the process, the time in the woods or out of nature where I can just look and listen and appreciate that moment. That's all. And that, to my previous point about finding local stories around you, is kind of where I sit today on wildlife filmmaking. I'm not waiting for Nat Geo to call. I'm not waiting to get hired and be paid to go on assignment. I'm gonna go out and make short films with local stories, or even stories from my travels maybe, until, well, I don't know, but maybe until it snowballs into bigger stories and opportunities, maybe not. But if I wanted to get rich, I wouldn't have chosen wildlife filmmaking as a career path. So I'm certainly not doing this, any of it for the money or the success. I'm doing this, filmmaking in general, and wildlife and conservation filmmaking and photography, because it's one of the few things that genuinely feels right. It feels like every time I do it, it's the exact thing that I'm supposed to be doing at that exact moment. It's a kind of vocational peace that I've yet to experience in any other pursuit. Anyways, that's enough hippie talk from me. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. See you in the next one. Chilly down here. Brisk spring day.